Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for joining me Saturday afternoon here in the United States, and I'm going to host a masterclass, a deep dive on how to build high-performing teams. So I want to thank you first and foremost for taking a little time out of your day to do a deep dive with me. One of the best things about being on a live call is we can answer your questions directly. So if you have questions at any time, you can just unmute and ask or drop your question in the chat. I'll make sure to answer all of your questions or reactions. And I want to start with just a quick intro about why I'm doing this. So my name's Lex Sisney. I'm the creator of organizational physics. And organizational physics is it's a way to think about how to lead your organization and really get it to thrive. Probably what's most unique about it is that it's a first principles based approach. So we take some kind of core principles and we just build up from there. And from my advantage point, that has some big advantages and probably a disadvantage. The advantage for me is that everything kind of hangs together. Like the principles we're going to talk about today apply to all systems, all levels. And maybe then the disadvantage is that if somebody's just skimming for surface level answers, or looking for what other companies are doing, that kind of knowledge quest, this model won't really hit. But it really hits once you start to study it and apply it and see how it does apply all systems, all levels, and it gets to be really cool. So I'm doing this for that reason. Like I want to do a little bit of a deep dive into one area of organizational physics today. It's about people and teams. And my mission is to kind of, spread the gospel, uh, be available to teach those who are interested and want to take this further. So today's call is on how to build high performing teams. And if you stick with me through the call, what we're going to start to equip you with is a talent draft board. Okay. So having this draft board in your hip pocket will allow you and your team to think systematically about who do we need to hire and or promote, and actually who do we need to let go of and why. So that's a really valuable tool. The other thing we're going to cover is this concept of PSIU. Just remember, PS, I love you. It's a framework to understand individual and team work styles and many other things. But we're going to apply PSIU to think about, okay, well, how do I create a high performing project team? Or what's the type of head of sales, for example, that I'm looking for? So this is kind of a shorthand. PSIU is kind of a shorthand to get vivid clarity to those kinds of decisions. Anytime we're working with others, there's going to be conflict. And so one of the other benefits of being on this call is I'm going to teach you that there's really three basic sources of conflict. And if you can identify what area of conflict you're in with this individual or group, it'll give you a good indicator about how to manage it better, how to make that destructive conflict more constructive. These next two areas here, about managing kind of an employee that seems disengaged, or maybe you're just struggling with like getting more feeling of camaraderie and more visible performance out of a virtual team than an in-person team. I want to talk through some maybe counterintuitive examples to how to get engagement and execute as a team virtually. I want to end up here with how do you identify the right person for the right role, and how do you form a high performing project team. So we're going to cover a lot of ground. It's going to be systems based. And again, if you have questions, ask in chat or just let me know and I'll pause and I'll answer as we go. And this document that I'm screen sharing, it's a working doc. I'm going to reference a lot of things in here, but you can dive in here in the chat and pull that up for your reference. Okay. So let's dive in. So I like to teach with pictures. And the first picture I want to show you is this one. It's called the execution diamond. And I want to share this picture to briefly share a core concept, but then orient where we're going to spend our time today. So this diamond is your organization. It could be a startup, it could be $1 billion company, it doesn't matter. M in the middle stands for mass. Mass is resistance to change. And I'd just like you to tune in with me that resistance to change exists everywhere, all the time, in everything. Okay. exists within you, me, the culture, the customers, the market. Yeah. And fundamentally, as a leader, your job is to manage the mass. That's it. You strip everything else away. That's your job. Manage the mass. And if you kind of think of this diamond as a locomotive or a rocket, what we're trying to do, or what you're trying to do, is get this head of momentum, right? Built up and flying in the right direction. The right direction means the right strategy. And for me, nothing's more important actually than your strategy. It's more important than culture. You know the adage, culture eats strategy for breakfast? It's bullshit. Because if you're pursuing, if the environment's zigging and you're zagging, see you later, buddy. You know, no amount of cultural enrichment is going to be around matter for much because your business isn't going to be around for long. My vantage point and what we teach in organizational physics is that strategy must be life cycle based if it's going to be effective, which means the current life cycle stage of your markets, business, and products dictate your strategy. Okay. Then next to strategy or supporting strategy, your culture, fundamentally, that's okay. Culture is a loaded term, but really it means the minimally accepted behavior that we allow to work here. Okay. So if you allow a lot of crap and a lot of infighting or a lot of, a lack of transparency or me-ness versus we-ness, your culture is going to show up like that. It's the minimally accepted behavior. I usually kind of break it down into shared vision and shared values and how we reinforce that. Then there's people. Okay. So strategy, culture, people, very obvious, very important. Less obvious, equally important is structure. Okay. Structure is how the business is designed. And process, the most important process in your business is actually the process of how we make decisions against constantly changing conditions and execute quickly. So decide and act, or just orient, decide, and act. Yeah. That's the most important process in the business. So what I want to talk about today is like if you only take one thing away from this call, if you want a high performing team, rather than looking right up here to look to hire or find great talent, okay, that would be people. And we're going to spend almost all our call today right up here in people. But rather than looking to just find great talent, I want you instead to think about these other elements of this diamond. Okay, if I want great people, we gotta be pursuing the right strategy with a compelling culture. If you only did those two things, compelling strategy, compelling culture, you're going to attract much higher caliber of people. Okay. However, you also, at certain stages of development, you also need to clean up your structure because the structure must support the strategy. And you can think of structure as what roles do we need to hire for and why at this stage of our development. One of the hidden things about structure is as you get to a certain stage of growth, you want to start to strip away competing accountabilities from the people so that you can find a person who really can focus and thrive in that one given role versus wearing a bunch of hats. And process. Do we have a process that pushes authority deep to where the work's getting done so that we attract highly motivated people who are talented at what they do? They energize a role in the structure, they buy into the culture, and they bring energy to the system, right? They help us execute against this strategy. So that's a lot of language I'm using, but maybe like if you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, like there's a distinction between playing a role and being the dungeon master. Okay? Like the dungeon master has to guide a group through the story. And kind of what I'm saying is a certain stage as a leader, you got to start to design the system. Design controls behavior. You got to design the system so the right outcomes occur. Right? And if you spent most of your time on that, you'll attract great people who stick around and thrive for the organization. Okay, so I'd just like you to keep that as background as we go through the rest of this class, okay? All right, first thing I want to show you is this talent draft board. So talent draft board is based out of a framework from the NFL. And I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago or so, I kind of got interested in like looking at really competitive industries like professional sports and like, okay, what are there any tips or tactics that they're pursuing that would allow a business, to leverage? And out of that came this framework called the draft board. And this book, you know, I go in detail in this book called How to Think About Hiring. Uh, a lot of this book is based upon the New England Patriots, um, or they were kind of the model franchise based on win rate and approach. Uh, but this framework actually predates the New England Patriots to the Bill Walsh era San Francisco 49ers. And what I want you to know about, like, notice just about Bill Walsh, Bill Belichick, very winning coaches, okay? But they also had a system. They had a system, and they just weren't out there scrambling around for talent at any cost, yeah? They were looking for the best talent at the best price for their system. And your business is the same. The reason you should know this framework and teach it to your team is that it allows you to do the same thing, to find the best talent for your system at the right price. Okay. So, what we're looking for, I'm going to kind of talk through these quadrants. So, a number one team leader, you want number one team leaders in the most important roles in your business. You can think of a number one team leader on a sports team like a captain or a starter. What that means is that they share the desired vision and values. If you're recruiting, by the way, and you're looking for shared vision and values, the only way, I mean, there's certainly vision and values tests out there, but really fundamentally, you got to date. You know, you don't go get married. Most people us don't go get married in Vegas 5 minutes after meeting, right? We spend some time getting to know the other person, and we have this initial attraction, but what we're really wondering about is, do we share same vision and values? Another way to frame that up is the airport test. If I'm stranded in Denver with this person, will we get along well stranded at the airport? Okay. So they share vision and values. They also, though, have very high skill, technical skill for the role. So technical skill means the ability and experience to actually do the work at a very, very high level. Now, I talked about if you're interviewing, sensing for vision and values, you got a date. Here, though, it's the skills test, the test for skill. So if you're hiring a programmer, you give them a programming test. If you're hiring a salesperson, you do a mock sales call. Head of brand marketing, you do a brand marketing campaign. It's no different than if you were a Broadway producer, you'd have your actors audition. Okay, so here it's shared vision and values. We're hanging out, we're spending time together. The more important the hire, the more time I'm going to spend seeing if we really resonate. Skill is show me. Okay. Now, skill alone isn't enough. There's also fit here. And fit means the style or the work style, the approach of an individual takes. So tune in with me. You could have a highly skilled salesperson that's very unorthodox, very creative. They don't need a playbook. Hey, they can run without a net in an unproven environment and figure things out as they go. But you could also have a very highly skilled sales leader who's like a by the book tactician. You know, they have a plan, they work their plan, they manage by the numbers. So I'm gonna break down how you assess for fit a little bit later, but I just want you to kind of tune in like, hey, skills not alone. It's skill and fit together that makes the right hire or promotion. And this last category here is candidate demand. So we're all free agents, right? And what great teams are able to do because they're pursuing a compelling strategy with a great culture, because the role sings intrinsically to the candidate, whether that candidate's internal or external, you don't have to overpay to get great talent. I'm not saying you can underpay. I mean, sometimes you can if there's equity and things like that, but basically you can pay a fair price because the candidate's so attracted to the overall environment opportunity. So number one team leader would be strong marks across the board. They share the vision and values, they have high skill and fit, and they're coming at a fair price. A number two team player would be more like a sports team would be like the bench. Okay. They share vision and values, which is in critical, not always easy to find, but their skill level or fit isn't quite where we need it to be, but we want them around because they share vision and values, because they're not costing us over market comp, and because we believe we can develop our bench over time. A number three specialist is an individual who's got really high skill and fit, but they're just mercenary. They're like a free agent, you know? So here, if we were a sports team, this would be the free agent mercenary we bring in because they have a exquisite track record. They fill a particular role on the team, and we want to pay for that skill set. The problem I've seen with this is that when you take a number three specialist and try to get them to act like a number one team leader, it almost always backfires. And I've seen a lot of companies bend over backwards to do that. Like this number three specialist is so talented. We can't find that skill anywhere else in the market. It's super scarce, but man, they're kind of an asshole. What do we do? Well, let's give them more stock because if they're really committed for the long term, they'll change their behavior. No, it doesn't work that way. So you can leverage number three specialists and you probably need to, uh, but just keep them out of the leadership core. Okay. Keep them on the periphery where they can add a lot of value. They get paid on the barrelhead. They get to do what's rare and expensive, and it creates value for the whole org, but you're just not building a culture or structure or key processes around them. And a number four waiver, that's pretty obvious, right? This is be who you let go of, you fire, you trade to the competition because they either have unshared vision and values, they don't have the right skill and fit, or their comp is just exorbitant. Okay. So I asked, let me tell you a fun story. So Brandon Bader is here on the call with us. And hi, Brandon. And about a year and a half ago, Brandon had emailed me saying, "Hey, I'm a PhD student, and I had this crazy idea to study the NFL and see how they approach talent management, and maybe there's some things tips we could use in corporate America about how to do that." And everyone thought I was crazy and sounded outlandish. And then I read your book, How to Think About Hiring, and like, oh my gosh, this was so exciting and so cool. And just a few days ago, Brandon emailed me his dissertation. That was he went through and approved, and it's a big accomplishment to get your doctorate in human resources. So, Brandon, I wanted to introduce you and like hear from your experience on this model, and what were like some what got you inspired by it, and like what did you learn that was interesting or surprising in your research?
Um, so I had to smile at a couple of things. Also, Lex, thanks for having me and nice to meet everybody. But I had to smile because I definitely fit into that number three category, especially when you said the asshole part. Sometimes being confronted with the truth is helpful. But no, what was great, and yeah, whenever you're doing something that is a little bit abstract, unique, you do have that thought, that feeling of it being crazy, but it's really rooted in people just not understanding the broader picture of it. There are millions of models that could be implemented. And I think what's really unique about what you did in your book was it's not fixed, right? You see this template that's right there. And like with any template, I don't believe it's meant to be replicated. It's meant to be emulated. And that's really what I wanted to do when I was doing the research and really basing it off of what you had done. What you created was something that is a blank canvas, right? Every team, you use the Patriots as a primary model, and you referenced other teams who had success. I believe it was the Eagles, the Steelers, and there was one other team as well. But when you look at all those teams, they're all independently composed using probably a similar metric, but a different model. And when I was doing the research, it was the perfect foundation to build things upon it. And that's what I found really interesting.
Yeah, very cool. Uh, I like what you said about templates. They're to be emulated. Like, no map is represents reality, but some maps or some templates are useful. And for me, I struggled as a business leader until I had the right maps and mental models to apply. Because I would get like lots of conflicting advice from my board, from successful people, and it just created a lot of mental noise in my head. And when I got tired of that, and I started to look for mental models or that would like I could apply like a frame on a situation and go, oh, I framed it up. Now I can figure out what to do and do it. So I think that's the most important thing about having models in your hip pocket is you can deploy them and use them and get benefit from them. Brandon, I want to say congrats again. Huge achievement. My wife actually has a PhD as well, so I know what it's like to go through that, and it's a really big accomplishment. I want to thank you again for coming on and spending a little bit of time with us. I'm going to bring you back a little later on the call since you agreed to fall on the sword and do a PSIU assessment. I want to share that with the group. Okay, so we have this framework, and we're looking for number one team leaders for your most important functions in the business. We'll take number two team players if we can't find a number one team leader. We'll use specialists sparingly, and we don't want any waivers. And if we have them, we should get rid of them quick. Okay? So, how do you then form a high performing team out of this structure? So, the first thing I want you to know is that anytime you have a team or anytime you have a relationship of one to many or many to many, there's going to be conflict. Yeah. And fundamentally, management is about navigating these conflicts. So we want conflict. It's like, forgive me for the metaphor, but it's like friction in sex. You want some friction, right? In a healthy relationship, there's some friction. And that friction leads to a more dynamic life, better decisions, new perspectives, growth, and maturity, right? I'd like you to know that if you're in conflict with someone, you're working with them, or even at home, you can put that conflict in one of these three buckets. And I want you to have this model I mentioned because it's easier to navigate, but also as you're thinking about someone on your team, or maybe even a few people on your team, like see if you can't put them in the bucket here of where you might be having conflict. So the first one is conflict of vision and values. Fundamentally, where do we want to go and how do we agree to behave? And that's the most extreme conflict there can be. So we fight wars over this. Uh, Socialism versus capitalism, one religion versus another, one country versus another, what we're fighting for a shared future. If there's no shared future, no shared vision, no shared values, it's almost impossible to align an organization. Because that's the thing that kind of sits above all. Yeah. So if you know, and by the way, that's why you date before you get married. I mentioned. So if it's a really important hire, you're sussing out like, are there really deeply aligned vision and values here? The next level, less severe, is interest. Okay, so interest means what's good for one side is a loss for another. What seems good for a sales team is a loss for the operations team. What's good for the shareholders is bad for the employees. Okay, so conflict of interest is always there. Conflict of vision and values doesn't always have to be there. It's very severe if it is. Conflict of interest, you navigate, by the way, the easiest way to navigate a conflict of interest is come up to back to, hey, what do we share? What are our aligned vision and values as an org? And so that's why it's important. Like culture is shared vision and values. Having that uh, defined, reinforced through stories, through rituals, through practices is really, really important because without having a shared vision and values over the top, conflict of interest can get really ugly. So you got to have that in place in order to navigate conflict of interest. Quick aside, if it's not obvious, politics are our method for navigating conflicts of interest in society. Yeah, that's the political system. Notice in our country, in the United States, there's no real sense of deep shared vision and values. There's a real schism. Consequently, politics has a hard time navigating conflicts of interest for the good of the whole. So this first step would be, if you want a better political system, is realign on shared vision and values. That's an aside. Okay, let's come back to business. So you have conflict of vision, values, interests, and styles. Now, styles shows up in how we approach the world. I could have a conflict of style with you because we're working together, and my style is like really fast and to the point, and your style is more nuanced and politically appropriate. You kind of feel us like oil and water. Yeah. And conflict of styles can also show up in ourselves, like, hey, I want to be more, I want to do some deep thinking work here. But man, I'm being pulled into all this administrative crap. Feel the tension there? So let's break down this styles conflict and show you how to harness that to build a high performing team. Okay, so every every system, you, me, your company, has finite energy and time, and it must use its finite energy to get more energy from the environment. That's why we got to eat. That's why your business needs sales. That's why relationships need interaction. That means that every system must shape the environment to get energy and respond to change. And it must do it as a whole organism, including all the parts that make it up. So there's this dance here, shaping, responding, whole parts. And we can put a little pattern language on there. So if we see an individual or a team showing up like a high drive to shape the environment and focus on the parts or the tasks, that's called the producing force. It's what drives results. So we should see a high producing force in functions like sales. Yeah. You know, make the sale. We should see it in functions like engineering, shipping the product. The, the truth of the matter, guys, is that you want a healthy producing force in every function of your business. It's the most important force up here because it's what allows us to produce results for whom we exist. If you're a business, you're not producing results for your customers, again, nothing else is going to matter much. So we want a healthy producing force everywhere. We want it really strong in functions like sales, engineering, operations, things like that. Now, it's not enough just to produce, of course. We also have to stabilize, all right? Stabilizing is that force that allows us to respond to change, and it brings order out of chaos. So we'd want to see a high stabilizing force in functions like, uh, well, operations, right? Because there's order, there's attention to detail, accounting, control, anywhere there's a need to bring high quality, repeatability, process. Yeah. So if we were only doing these two things as a business, producing and stabilizing, guess what? We would be successful. We would be profitable business because we're producing results and we're doing it efficiently. We've systematized how we sell, service, and deliver. And as long as there's demand, we're successful. The challenge is that the environment's constantly in flux, it's constantly changing. So while we're doing these two things in the top, we also have to be innovating for a future, changing future, which is what drives innovation. We want to see a high innovating force in functions like research and development, new business development, brand marketing, things like that, that are oriented towards the future and what's coming. And then, of course, we got to keep everyone together in cohesion, unifying force. This is what brings teams together. So all these forces are in conflict. They're in conflict within me and you and your teams and your broader organization. And where it gets really useful is we can bring it alive as we think about our own work style and the work style of those we work closely with. So I'd like you to remember this acronym, PS I love you. And let's just do a little test here, okay? So let's imagine you're standing on a dock and at your feet is a rowboat. Now, coming at you on the dock is a person with a high producing force. We call that the producer style. They're focused on what to do, driving it forward, getting it done. You put him or her in the rowboat and say, row. Okay, what do? They start rowing, right? Thank God I'm off this call or out of this meeting or whatever. Let's get some work done. They don't ask a lot of questions. They're just happy to pound the rock, row the oars. Yeah. Different style comes at you on the dock. Now they're moving more methodically. They're aware of a lot of implications. Okay. They're analyzing a lot. So they're moving more methodically because they're aware of so many contingencies. This is a stabilizing force or stabilizer style. They're focused on how to do things efficiently. You put him or her in the rowboat and say, row, their reaction is, well, wait. I need more data. Where are we going? How long are we going to be gone for? Right? Where's the water? Where's the food? What are the current conditions? They had a lot of questions they're going to want time to process. And once they've processed it, then they can do a very efficient, solid, steady stroke. Boom, boom. Okay, very different than a producer style. Now, a high innovator style is coming at you on the dock, and they're moving pretty quickly. They got a lot of energy. They want to disrupt stuff. They want to put their stamp on the universe. So you put him or her in the rowboat, and they're going to say, okay, cool, but why don't we do this? Why not put a sail on this baby? Why not put a motor on it? That would be pretty fun and cool. Why not? Why not? Why not? Why not? So they're looking for new and better, different ways to do things and really put their stamp on it. Last example, high unifier comes to you on the dock. Now they're moving appropriately to the setting. They really want to connect with others, understand others. Who's doing what is kind of their orientation. So you put him or her in the rowboat and say, row. They're going to say, awesome, let's row, but come on, join me. Let's get a crew together. We'll row together. Okay. So each of us has all four forces at work in our work style. But because we have finite energy and time, we've developed a style that is most energy efficient for us. Okay. So when I'm happy and engaged, I'm able to express a high innovating unifying force at this stage of my career. I can be creative. I can connect with other people. Yeah. Early in my career, though, if I was a big entrepreneur, a big producer, innovator, and so I wasn't happy unless I was unhappy, right? Unless I had problems to solve, disruptions to make, pressure to put on the system. I've changed over time. My style has changed over time. It would be a mistake to hire me and put me in a role that required a big producing engine, you know, or a big stabilizing engine. So I'm just not intrinsically motivated to do that, even if I have the skills for it. So one of the ways we help you figure out a style for yourself or for others is we do a PSIU style assessment. So Brandon was not only kind enough to join the call, he also agreed to let me just kind of take an assessment, let me run through it with you to show you how to use it. Brandon, you ready?
Let's make it happen.
All right. So the person takes this assessment and they get the report back, and you do too as the hiring manager or internal manager. And first thing I usually do is go to this page called How You're Showing Up. So I'd like you to notice that Brandon is showing up with a high drive to stabilize and a high drive to innovate. Okay. So what that tells me, he's very smart. He's thinking a lot about big picture and details of the big picture. Is that true, Brandon?
Yeah. Sometimes to people's frustration, yes.
Yeah, sometimes people's frustration, right? So a role here, like it makes sense to me that you pursued a PhD, right? Because what could be more big picture than a thesis that ties it into actual, research? Yeah. And I makes sense to me that you would kind of pursue a model or look for models that allowed you to kind of think creatively and disruptively, and then find the evidence to support it. Okay. Now, this next graph shows how Brandon's wanting to show up. Okay. And so you can see here, he's wanting to show up and bring more throughput. Okay. So that actually also makes a lot of sense to me, Brandon. I don't know where you're at in your career, but since you just finished your dissertation, I imagine you want to shift gears and put it into practice. Is that true?
That is 100% accurate. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So if you were looking to hire Brandon, and you have this report in the interview, like, by the way, there's no right or wrong score here. Each of us is some combination of this. It's like, oh, I see, Brandon, you've done your research and now you really want to execute. There's a lot of fire, vim, and vigor here that wants to get deployed. And also a little bit, Brandon, you're looking to maybe connect more with others. Probably you've been deep in research and now you want to come out, bring it out into the world It's going to show up through your own work and collaborating with others or working with others. Does that resonate?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, yes.
Yeah. And this green one is okay, this shows how we think others in the environment want us to be. So let's imagine you're Brandon, and the blue line here is okay, I'm showing up, been showing up with like down in the details and just figuring out the big picture. The environment wants Brandon to come out now. Okay. Spend more time unifying with us, buddy, and let's put that PhD into action or something like that. So from Brandon's vantage point, the environment wants him to come forward a little bit more, almost a little bit or a little bit more than you want to, but you can kind of feel the pull there. Now, with this, we don't know if that's really what the environment feels. We're just picking up how Brandon's orienting here. That makes sense, Brandon?
It does. I do have a comment on that, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
please. I love it.
So, yeah. So with that green, because when I was looking at this, that's how I interpreted it as well. With that coming out, that unifying piece, I've been told many times that I am too immersed in what I do, too
Mhm.
focused on the point. So that part about others wanting me to come out, that's what I think, and that
Yep.
has also been the projection towards me as well. But
Yeah.
I, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to validate what you're perceiving with others, that you trust. Uh there's just a little caveat here for everybody. I think 360s can be interesting, but I want you to notice that if your team is all high stabilizer and you're a big innovator, your 360 review is going to show what? You should slow down. You should putting so much change on the system, right? So just be mindful that these forces are always at work in every system. There's always a trade-off, and what your job is as a leader is to uh, put the right force in the right part of the organization. Does that make sense what I'm saying to everybody? Put the right force in the right parts of the organization. Okay. So let me drive this home a little bit more. I'm on the working notes. Uh, let's say that you're forming up a new project team, okay? And you put four big producers on the team. Okay? Four big producers on this team. It's uh it's 2 weeks later, and you do a status check with this team. What do you hear? What? Oh yeah, we finished that last week. Okay. Now, as the manager, you start to look under the hood, and what do you find? You find all kinds of errors, all kinds of emission errors. Like they missed some really creative opportunities, and that team's already really started to fragment. Yeah, because there's nothing unifying them or holding no big picture holding them together. Okay. Now, to con no, maybe not that way. Now, let's say you put another project team together, but this time it's four big stabilizers. Okay. Now your intuition's like, yeah, I probably need to give these guys another week. Okay. So 3 weeks later, you check in, say, okay, what's the status on this project? What are you going to hear? Well, we actually have a Gantt chart and a RACI diagram, and we've discovered that it's going to take 3 times as long and cost twice as much. Okay. But not one actual piece of work was done. Like a lot of planning took place, but no actual implementation of anything? This is a trick question. It's advanced question, but you put four big innovators on this project team, and your sense is going to go faster. So you check in 2 weeks, and what you discovered is that somebody was murdered in cold blood. Okay. What I mean is that a true big innovator must own the vision. Okay. And I don't mean pretend innovators. I mean like the real innovators. Like there's only one Steve Jobs or only one Mark Zuckerberg, or pick your big innovator in an org, is they got to own the high ground and express their vision. It's innate. And so if you're in a rowboat with four innovators, one got thrown overboard at least, okay? And then the others are feeling disgruntled because they've lost the vision battle, okay? Uh Now four big unifiers, you're sense, yeah, I need to give this team another week. Now what have they been doing for 3 weeks? Well, they got together and had drinks. They've visited each other's homes and they've been having a great time. But then you put pressure on the system to perform, and you'll quickly see that unifying force turn upside down, and there's like all kinds of finger pointing, politicking, and things like that. Okay. So how do you how do you create a high performing team using this model? What I want to propose is that as a general orientation, if it's if it's a project that requires new growth, new innovation, it's growth oriented, okay? Put a big producer or innovator in the front. Put them in the lead position. Support him or her with a stabilizer and potentially unifier and fill in with producers. So you want this creative force unleashed, enough muscle to move things forward, a little bit of stabilizing force to help bring project orchestration, things like that, a little bit of unifier to help keep things together, but almost all the focus is on unleashing over here this producing and innovating force to go be disruptive and entrepreneurial and get stuff done. If you had more of a liability prevention project, like compliance or things like that, uh, I'm going to encourage you to staff it with a producer who has a healthy stabilizer. Okay. Which means they're going to get this done and behind us. It's not going to last forever, but they're going to have enough order, attention to detail, industry knowledge, whatever, to prevent us from suffering any systemic harm. What you don't want to do is put a high stabilizer style that's all about order, uh, you know, control in the lead position because there's not enough oomph there to move things forward quickly. High unifier can be really tempting, okay? But high unifier in the lead position uh, can work if there's no real pressure, short range pressure to get things done. Like if it's a longer range, like nonprofit or social good initiative, you could certainly get away with a high unifier at the top, and it'll have a lot of longevity and a lot of cultural buy-in. But if there's if there's pressure to actually move stuff forward, you'd want to come back over here and look to lead from the right and support from the left. That's a little bit complicated. Um, I'm making suggestions based on the orientation here, time for like their time horizon, the energy they bring, and I want to recognize that if you only had a producers and innovators, you're going to run into some very predictable problems. It's only going to work in the short range, and that all four styles are necessary and essential. You just want to get the right mix on the team. And since you're a business, I want you to have a bias towards the right. Linda, do you want to add anything or help me clean that up a little bit?
I just want to point out, I think there's a question.
Oh, I
Oh,
didn't see.
yeah, sorry. I just had a quick question. I'm just thinking about some like real scenarios. Let's say an entire team of people are thrown up underneath a big unifier. How do we support them the best? Like, let's say
Yeah.
the CEO is a big unifier. You're not getting rid of that unification. You're not changing that. How do we
Yeah.
support
Push the decision making and work down to the team below. So let them unify at the top, but add enough role clarity and delegation so that the actual engine's happening underneath.
Thank you.
Other questions about this concept? All right, now some other things you can do to get high performance out of your team, and especially in a virtual setting, and it also solves disengagement, is how you run your team meetings. Okay. And so what I do in the team meetings that I teach, which is always the leadership group or the strategic execution team, is an individual doesn't represent themselves. They represent a role in the structure. See the distinction there? Like if uh, I'm gonna have Linda write a role update for the week, but she's not gonna write it for Linda. She's gonna write it for the role or roles that she's performing. You with me? Very, very important. So let's say Linda's doing the role of head of global brand marketing. In writing, we have her objectives here. She writes up her last week's #1 accomplishment, this week's #1 priority. I don't want a list of tasks. It's not my job to manage her tasks. What's her #1 accomplishment? What's her #1 priority? And where does she have entropy? Entropy in this case means hurdles, needs, support requests. Okay. Now, what happens is then Linda writes her role update, and even if we're in a virtual setting, as a team, we go through and we read each other's updates, and we write down our questions and reactions and feedback to our peers. And so what happens is Linda's energizing the role that's reinforced every week, and the peers are asking questions and getting their needs met from that role. And what I've seen happen is that even in a virtual setting, because of just this reinforcement structure, like Linda really starts to own the role because it's very uncomfortable if she's underperforming, right? The same questions come up or the same feedback comes up, and 2 or 3 weeks in a row, it's like there's nowhere to hide. It's insanely uncomfortable to not be energizing the role to meet the needs of the organization. You know, the only thing that makes this not work is if your culture is sandbagging. You know, they're like not asking authentic questions or not getting their authentic needs met. They're just like, you know, great job, Linda, when they're not really thinking great job, you know? So as a leader, you gotta do this own extra thing, which is you gotta model constructive feedback in real time. You know the old adage, like praise publicly, criticize privately? It's bullshit. Because if you're doing that, then you're just reinforcing like a positive feedback loop, which just leads to more negative behaviors. Instead, we need to model like I care about you all as people, and we're here to challenge each other professionally. You know, care personally, challenge professionally. And so if you can model that as a leader, the rest of the team will follow. Can like tune in with me how hard it is for peers to give each other authentic feedback unless it's modeled safely, you know? So you got to model as a leader to give challenging feedback. But as you can get that going, feedback is learning, you know? We go, oh, this is what a good role update looks like. Oh, this is how I can respond to questions and feedback or ask questions and feedback. And so my proposal is that rather than trying to invest in things like, you know, incentives or cultural enrichment programs or things like that, it's just you just create a performance environment with a ton of transparency where people got to energize the role, and it's really uncomfortable. There's nowhere to hide if you're not energizing the role. Then it's obvious to you as a leader, it's obvious to them, it's obvious to the peers, and if there's not another spot in the organization for that person, then they need to go. Yeah, and the entire company and that person will be better as a result for it. Now, one other thing we do in org physics is we like, you know, is we want very clear, simple role definitions, not like pages of job descriptions. They're impossible to digest, right? And they're always changing. So one thing we do in work physics is we create a role scorecard. I'm in some software that we use here. This is a role called strategic execution, for example. I want to show you a role snapshot. Okay, so here's the head of company that's called strategic execution. We don't use titles, we use roles. Notice from this head of strategic execution, we want to see a high drive to produce, innovate, and unify. They must keep a long range effectiveness orientation. That means they're consistently doing the right thing for the company over time. We call out the role purpose, the key performance indicators, top 2 or 3, the most important key accountabilities. That to me is a very effective and useful role snapshot, because anybody on the team can look in and go, okay, here's what Mike's accountable for. Here's what he's focused on. Here's another example. Here's demand gen. Okay. They're short range oriented. Here's their purpose. Here's their key performance indicators and key accountabilities. I believe, like, if you just had a purpose, KPIs, and key accountabilities for every role in a note card, on your wiki or in a software like this, you get a tremendous amount of role clarity when that's combined with regular written role updates every week. Number 1 accomplishment, number 1 priority, where do I have entropy? Okay. So let me reinforce. Virtual teams can be high-performing teams. In-person teams can be high-performing teams, but you got to design the environment to reinforce the right behaviors. Having people energize particular roles with a role snapshot and written role updates is the best combo I've seen to get high performance. And if you're dealing with a disengaged employee, this will give you the lens to understand why. Oh, they don't really want to do demand gen. Oh, they're a producer innovator when we need a stabilizer unifier for this role. Oh, they don't have the skill set or qualifications to thrive at this role. Oh, they really don't buy into the culture. Okay. If you lack this like minimalist structure and transparency, it's really impossible to know and to take corrective action. With it, you can actually move the needle on your team performance. If you like this way of thinking, I would definitely read this book, How to Think About Hiring. It comes as a PDF if you want to use these PSIU assessments. Like, one thing you can do with PSIU assessments is create a role scorecard. And then you can send the link to a candidate to see how closely they match the target profile. But I would read this book. It's a quick read. Even the first chapter is just read that. That's a good one. This model's been deployed in a lot of companies now around the world, and you can go here to see case studies and testimonials. Pretty cool stuff if you like to see what other companies have done. I want to thank Brandon very much for coming on the call and say congrats again on his PhD. A very, very cool internet friend. If you are expansion stage CEO, I'm always interested in potentially collaborating with really cool companies. So you can ping me and we can have a little a talk, and I can let you know if I can add value or not. And if you want to take advantage of any of the tools I've referenced here as a kind of a little thank you for joining the call, you can enter this code MC20 and take 20% off. So on the light membership program, that's about $150 off. Okay. So in summary, I'd like you to just come back here. If you want a high-performing team, don't just go around and race around looking for better talent. First of all, it's hard to recognize. Second of all, everyone else is looking for the same thing. So there's endless competition. Instead, if you took like half the energy you're spending on that and think, okay, what is a compelling growth and accurate growth strategy? How do we energize a transparent, high-performance culture? Do we have the right role clarity for this strategy? By the way, structure must support the strategy. And do we have processes that allow highly motivated people to take the ball and run with it? Like we push the work, we push the authority down to where the work's getting done. If you can do those things, you'll attract great people and keep them. Okay, I appreciate everybody's time. I'm happy to answer any other questions if you have them.
I just want to say thanks, man. I enjoy everything you put out. I love reading all your stuff, and I mean, this is really great, and I appreciate you doing this for all of us on a Saturday.
Oh, thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. By the way, Mike, guys, is an amazing entrepreneur. Got 5 or 6 businesses he spun up using organizational physics, and really cool guy doing cool things. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
all.
really appreciate your time, bud. This has
Thank
been
you very
highly
much.
enlightening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Lex.
Thank you. Cheers.
Great appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
See you guys.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. So long. Thank you, everybody.